Well, welcome to the Debt Matters podcast. We help Canadians here find solutions to their debt with licensed insolvency trustees from across Canada. I'm Wayne Kay, and in today's show, we're going to talk about good debt versus bad debt. Joining me, I've got Derek Chase from Derek Chase & Associates, a licensed insolvency trustee in Campbell River. Derek, thanks for being here today.
It's my pleasure, Wayne. Thanks for having me.
You got it. I love talking about debts because some debt is good, some debt is bad. And we're going to find out all the differences today on the show. So I'm looking forward to it. Debt's not always a bad thing, is it?
No, that's just a part of life. Sometimes when you're making a significant purchase, it can be necessary and just part of regular life. There's no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm. I remember talking with a guy I know he started a trucking company years ago. And I mentioned something about debt, and he said, I live in debt, but I use it to grow my business. So that would be, I guess, obviously a good debt. So when we talk about good debt, what are we talking about?
Well, I think along these lines, good debt gives you ability to do things that are in the long run going to be good in the sense that you're growing your company, or maybe you are acquiring a house to live in, or some tangible asset that's going to benefit your life, and you can't afford it without going to the bank or some lender and borrowing.
Right, because there's nobody's going to be able to just save up enough to go buy a house these days.
No, most of us to buy a house just without the use of a mortgage is just not practical. But even if you're acquiring something that's good, like growing your business or acquiring a piece of real estate, that loan still needs to be good in the sense that the interest rate that you're paying is acceptable to you. A good debt definitely has low or modest interest rates. A good debt can quickly become a bad debt if you are doing something with an asset that's going to be good for your life, but the interest rate on that debt becomes exorbitant, just too high, and almost like a loan shark type situation. And that pushes that debt from good to bad, in my opinion. All
right. So let's do the shift to bad debt. What does bad debt look like?
Firstly, bad debt has high interest rates, in my opinion. We see interest rates on debts range anywhere from 3% to 33%. So it's a wide range. And if you end up in a high interest rate loan, a 28% on your interest rate, you're just never going to pay that back. And you're paying such huge amounts of interest. It makes it just a very bad situation. And it kind of in conjunction with that, if I put on my accountant's hat, any debt, the interest expense on it is either deductible on your tax return or non-deductible. And certainly bad debt has non-deductible interest. So you aren't able to get a bit of a tax benefit from it.
Mm-hmm. So what would be the debts you can get tax credit from?
Well, certainly any debt that you're using to earn business income is deductible, as well when you borrow to make an investment, say in some sort of stock products, some sort of investment, that can be deductible interests. In contrast, if you are taking a cash advance off your credit card to buy something, or going to a payday loan type place just to get some cash to go out for the evening, that is not deductible interest.
Mm-hmm. And that's, as we've learned before, is a very bad thing, but yet people fall for it and seem to have to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's there's choices every day, and just having more information about what happens with those choices, I think, is powerful for people to understand, which is why I'm glad you're doing these podcasts.
So should we talk about how to avoid bad debt? What does that mean?
I think avoiding bad debt is just understanding that there's different lenders out there, and they're not all created equal. They in particular on the interest rates. So my advice, if someone was going for a loan, would be to zero in and focus in on that interest rate that you're being charged, and really consider whether that's in a range that's okay with you. And also ask yourself, can I deduct this interest or not? Another part to really shop for is whether there's a large amount of fees for administration or some other sort of add-on to the loan that you're getting. And how do you avoid that? Well, I mean, I suppose if you're sticking with mainstream lenders, you're not going to get hit with that sort of penalty, but just pay attention and shop around for better deals. Believe it or not, you can shop for different rates and terms, much like you'd shop for anything.
And I think that's a really good point. I mean, the reason we're doing this podcast is to educate and to teach people that maybe have never heard of an LIT, a licensed insolvency trustee. They may not be up to date on how to go about shopping for loans and what would be a too high of a interest rate, because instead of looking at the interest rate, most of the times they kind of just talk about the payment, not the rate.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's another part of a bad debt is debt that takes too long to pay back. I can remember seeing a documentary on car loans that are getting stretched out well beyond 7 years, and or 6-7 year car loan, and that's just too long.
Mm-hmm.
And that car is going to fall dramatically in value.
Well, you're not kidding. My son's friend is a finance manager at a car dealership, and he said the majority of the trucks he sells are in the $80,000 range, and it's 8-year payments. Is pretty much what people are signing up for. And he said people are fine with it for the first 3 or 4 years, but after that, they're not fine with it because you're paying, you've just paid $100 and some $1,000 for what is now worth $40,000 of a truck.
Yeah, that's hard to see at the time of the purchase, but when you think about it, it is huge payments still for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned 33% that you've actually seen people come in. And obviously, there's financial troubles that are going on, and a lot of people get into this, and they don't know where to turn, and they see, you see a 33%. I mean, just to hear that is almost shocking to me, but I'm shocked with a 20% through the credit cards, I think, is criminal. Never mind 33%. Are these rates not regulated somewhere?
Yeah, there is some, I think typically provincial acts that are supposed to regulate interest rates, but I'm not entirely sure what's going on with that, but it happens. And I think it always will. It's just part of life. In order to avoid it, like I say, you need to be aware and find out what the interest rate's going to be. I also want to touch on another debt, Wayne, that I think is a bad debt. And I think income tax debt is a bad debt. The reason I would put it in the bad debt category is just because Canada Revenue Agency is, they're very powerful in the way they collect, and they can sometimes be unpredictable. I've talked to people who were diligently trying to pay down their income tax debt, and then all of a sudden the representative on the CRA side of things changed, and then their deal wasn't good enough, and then CRA can pull out their heavy hammer to start garnishing and draining bank accounts. So I would call income tax debt a bad debt as well.
Yeah, absolutely. When is that used? I mean, that's when you've made a bunch of money, typically as probably a solopreneur, somebody who's doing this on their own. They haven't taken the taxes off that they need to at the end of the year. They owe whatever it is, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 in taxes, and they don't have that money. That's what we're talking about?
Yes, often people who are self-employed or aren't having tax withheld at source. If you don't file your taxes or pay your installments on time, the tax debt will not only grow like you would imagine just slowly each year, but because of the penalties and interests that CRA can put on to income tax debt, it takes off more like a jet fighter, and the tax debt really starts to go high.
Really?
So it's not a good debt to have, but thankfully, we have solutions for that as well as the other types of debt.
Well, let's dive into what those solutions look like. If you have too much bad debt, how do you go about conquering it?
Well, I think the first step is always just to get the facts down in front of you, get the different types of debt down and what interest rate you're paying. I would advise, if you're going to pay it off on your own through your monthly budget, just pay down the highest interest rate one first. That makes the most sense to me. But if circumstances are such that there's just too much of it coming at you from all different angles, then we get into the other options, such as approaching your financial institution for some type of consolidation loan. And if you're denied there, then there's some very powerful tools that the federal government has allowed Canadians to use. The most popular one being a consumer proposal, where you can make an offer or a proposal to pay back a portion of that debt over time.
Mm-hmm. So, and when we're talking bad debt, typically when you're talking about Canadians, once again, we're going to be talking about the credit card debt. We're going to talk about, you said income tax debt is a bad one. Car loans, are they considered bad debt?
Well, that one could be good or bad, I suppose. Like if it's a high interest rate car loan debt that's going to go on for 8 years, like I don't think that's a very good debt. And sometimes people get into that setting where they're exchanging vehicles and all of a sudden they've got a relatively old vehicle with still 6 years to run on the loan. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's another podcast that's surrounding the creditor's right to seize their vehicle. And Yikes. That type of law varies from province to province across Canada. So you're saying what we do is we take a pen and paper and we figure out, okay, we owe this much money on credit cards. We owe this much money on a line of credit. We owe this much on whatever else. Figure it all out, figure out what the percentages are, and then aggressively go after and knock each one down at a time. Or can you go to the bank and say, okay, I owe $10,000 and I've got a line of credit, or maybe you don't even have a line of credit. Could you ask for a line of credit? Will they give you one? You know, it's definitely worth the ask. It's the logical place to try. And I think the difficulty that people face is qualifying for that consolidation loan. And perhaps their credit rating just isn't good enough for their bank, or, you know, perhaps their income level just doesn't qualify and the bank says no. Mm-hmm. And then what do? You have to search out your other options. And thankfully there are other options that exist. I got to say that annoys me a lot, that the banks, because a lot of times, do you see that it's the credit cards that get racked up? Like, and there's not just one, but they've offering all these credit cards that have these ridiculous rates. Yeah. And then you get up, you're in trouble, and then they won't give you a normal something to bring down your interest rates. Yeah, it's true. I mean, certainly the ease of getting credit is a huge part of why people find themselves with too much debt. When your credit limit is just raised automatically or out of the blue, and the debt keeps building. So there's definitely that aspect to people having too much debt, is that ease of credit. Mm-hmm. Okay. And what are some other tips? Because oftentimes you will kind of put on your counseling hat to help people through these situations. So that's one of the tips we're going to do. What's the next thing you can do? You know, I think just reach out and get some information that's specific to your circumstances. Most LITs across Canada will offer a free 30 minutes. So, you know, why not take advantage of that? You know, we talk to a fair amount of people who are somewhat shocked to learn that they can make a consumer proposal to income tax debt. You know, they think that that's impossible, but in fact, it's part of the law. In contrast, they couldn't phone up income tax directly and say, "Hey, I'll pay you 50%." That's just not allowed. But if it happens through a consumer proposal, it's allowable. Wow. So without that information, you're in a totally different setting. And getting the facts down on paper, taking a hard look at your budget, trying to get that consolidation loan with your financial institution. These are all good things, but there's still a consumer proposal. Or if you need another tool, there's also a bankruptcy filing that's available federally that can sometimes be the most logical thing to do. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to struggle and try to pay this off. There is a way to really stop this, as you mentioned. The best world is one where there's no debt. But I mean, sometimes that's not possible. And then if you get stuck in bad debt and not good debt, sometimes that bad debt can create too much momentum to deal with, and you have to look at other remedies. So it's good news that right. Other remedies are available. And it's really, you can see how this happens. I mean, you deal with it every day,
But you can really see how, we're going along as Canadian, we're living, we're making all our payments, life is great, and then all of a sudden you get something, you're sick for a little bit of time, your income goes down, your debt, what happens to it? It goes up, it grows a little bit, or maybe all of a sudden the company you're working for restructures, you're out of work, payments, the amount of money you have coming in really drops substantially, and that's a lot of stress because if everything stayed the same, you would have been perfectly fine and been able to pay off these debts. And I think people need to know, it happens. There's so many reasons on why bad debt can happen to people.
Oh, couldn't agree more. There's just a million different reasons that we see that can interrupt a person's cash flow or create unmanageable debt. And I can just think of the travel industry or the airlines that were full capacity, and then boom, here's a pandemic for you. So there's more reasons than we can list out that can cause financial difficulty.
Yeah, and if you're in one of those situations and you're listening here, you can reach out to Derek, and as he mentioned, the free consultation through a licensed insolvency trustee could just give you a little bit of help, some options. It doesn't mean that you're going into bankruptcy or anything like that. It just means that you're getting a few different ideas. Derek, is there anything else you want to touch on regarding our topic about debt, bad debt, and making these payments?
I don't think there's anything to be afraid of with debt. There is good and valid reasons to get some lending assistance. It's just you want to be well aware of your interest rate you're paying and how long you're going to pay it for, and just be eyes wide open going into it.
Terrific. Derek, thank you very much. I will have you back on the show. We always have great discussions. And once again, if you want to find out more information, well, you can go to the website bankruptcytrusteebc.ca. And that's it for today's Debt Matters podcast. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcast from. And of course, for more information, you can always check out debtmatters.ca. I'm Wayne. Thanks very much for listening.